That could have been the end for Mack Goodman. He could have perished like the tens of thousands of men and boys on the push toward Berlin. His body could have been one of those that lined the roads for future waves of soldiers on the offensive. But that's not what the Lord had in store for his servant. The Lord wanted to give Mack the chance to make good on his promise, so the Lord made good on his. It was in that moment that Mack's ministering angels arrived on the scene in the form of 2 Army medics.
Said, my goodness, he's dead. And then they looked over there, well, he's dead. And about that time, I opened my eyes. I heard, and I said, he's alive. And they picked me up and put me on a stretcher and on a run and put me on a Jeep. They had a thing that would hold that stretcher on there. And went to a field hospital from there. And so that was the end of my fighting.
And so it was the end for Mack Goodman. The end of the cold, wet, bloody march against the Nazis. The end of the fear of facing down machine guns and Panzer tanks. But not the end of his life, and certainly not the end of his troubles. He would now begin a long road to recovery that began at a handful of field hospitals, each one administering the life-saving blood transfusions Mack would need to survive. He would make it back to the coast, cross the channel, and land at an English hospital for the war wounded. It was during this critical time for Mack that his family back home would first receive word of his condition. November 20th, almost a full 2 weeks after Moncord Woods, a telegram was sent to St. David. Nettie anxiously read the news as a neighbor jotted down the message over the town's only telephone. Regret to inform you, it read, your husband was seriously wounded in France, November 8th. Details of his new address and protocol for sending mail must have seemed insignificant compared with the worry that immediately set in. You will be advised as reports of condition are received. Signed Dunlop, the acting adjutant general. And that was it. No reassurance that all was well. No one knew the extent of Mack's injuries. 6 weeks into his recovery came the lonely Christmas of 1944.
They had radios in there so we could get to hear a little war news, and then come Christmas time, they played some Christmas songs.
It must have been a relief for Mack's family back home when word was finally reached on his condition from the War Department the first week of January. It was a letter from Major General J.A. Ulio, and it stated that Mack was making normal improvement and that additional information would be forthcoming. January 15th, the headline from the Associated Press, 21 Arizona soldiers wounded in Europe. Private Thomas M. Goodman from St. David was among them. His trip back across the Atlantic was less enjoyable than the first, as Mack was laid out on a stretcher for the duration. He then boarded a train that set out for Santa Barbara, California, where wounded soldiers were sent for recovery and rehabilitation. Upon arrival, Mack was granted 10 days leave to finally reunite with the love of his life. Nettie would accompany Mack back to California as he was still in need of intense physical therapy to regain his strength. When he was well enough, Mack Goodman, the Army veteran, returned home to Arizona. He still had limited movement in his left arm, so it was a relief when a Mesa service station owner offered him a job. And so his rehab continued.
It was a service station with but he sold fishing equipment and hunting stuff, you know, guns and ammunition, fishing tack. All you needed to go fishing, you had it there. He was a great fisherman himself. And he said, well, I need a man, but he says, you're too young. He says, you could be going off to the Army any time, you know. And I said, well, I've put my time in the Army. And the first thing you did was car drive up, good morning or good afternoon, what can I do for you? And it didn't make any difference whether they was going to buy any gas or anything, you washed the windshield. And if they wanted their tire checked, you checked their tires. So, and big sign up there, service with a smile.
Perhaps Mack's first post-war goal in the service of the Lord was the most important of his life. He had to get well enough to baptize his young wife.
I told Mack, I said, you know, you're going to baptize me, and I'm gonna be baptized while you're still around to do it. So, because he came home still spitting blood and coughing up blood.
After months of hard work, the day finally arrived.
So after I was baptized and went to meetings the first time and took the sacrament, then I said, now I know why I had this feeling, you know, because I hadn't been baptized yet. So we continued to do all that we were supposed to do.
The Spirit forged a bond between Mack, Nettie, and the one who'd saved him as he lay bleeding on the battlefield, the Savior of us all. And so it was a covenant that Mack has never broken, that's kept him going strong in the service of the Lord for the last 65 years.
Well, little did he know that he was preserved, I guess, to be a bishop's counselor, to be a high councilman, to be the bishop, to be in the stake presidency, to all of these things.
Preserved also to be a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather. A southern Arizona small town really is a world away from what was, the violence and the bloodshed which preserved our freedom and saved countless future generations from oppression and tyranny.
This is to certify that the President of the United States of America has awarded the Bronze Star Medal to then Private Thomas M. Goodman, Army of the United States, for meritorious achievement while serving in the European Theater of Operations during the period of September 1944 to 18 January 1945. Private Goodman's exemplary performance of duty in active ground combat was in keeping with the finest traditions of military service and reflects great credit upon himself, the 328th Infantry Regiment, and the Army of the United States.
A Bronze Star and a Purple Heart hardly do justice to the experiences of so many decades ago, when the world hung in the balance and young men rose to the challenge.
I'm not a hero. I just called and did the things that I was asked to do, tried to be obedient. So I just want you to know that this peace and liberty, justice for all that we believe in, hasn't come cheap. Many lives have been lost and taken to help keep this peace and this Constitution that we believe so heavily in.
To our humble hero, Mack, Dad, Grandpa Goodman, we say thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for our liberty. And thank you for our lives.